your host, Carmilla, and this is Cat Scratch Radio, a horror podcast. Welcome to Cat Scratch Radio, a horror podcast. I'm Carmilla, but my writer name is Matu C. Lawrence. I write horror and dark fantasy, often with a hint of romance, and I've been a horror enthusiast since I was 7 years old, watching it on a small black and white TV in my grandmother's guest room. Nearly 30 years later, and I'm here to spread my love of horror to others. Today on the show, we have Matthew Brockmeyer, horror author of The Rotting Sky, and Kind Lipinthe, and co-host of the podcast Murder Coaster. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome to the show. And today we're going to be discussing the intersection between horror and crime. Correct?
That sounds good to me.
All right. Why don't you get us started?
Well, obviously, a lot of horror is based on true crime. I suppose the most famous case of all would be Ed Gein. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He was known as the Butcher of Plainsfield in 1950s in Wisconsin. He was mostly a ghoul. He killed two people that they know of, but he wasn't necessarily a serial killer. He really liked to dig up bodies.
Oh.
And yeah, and he made all kinds of things with them. Lampshades out of human faces. He had a belt of women's nipples. He was also a cannibal. When they came to his house, they found a heart being cooked. But he made himself. He was obsessed with his mother. He loved his mother, and when she died, he went into like a psychosis, and he tried to build a suit of women that reminded him of his mother. So he would read the obituaries in the newspaper and try to find recently deceased older women who resembled his mother and dig up their bodies and skin them. And then he made this suit out of them that he would dance in the moonlight with. And that went on to inspire countless horror films and horror books, from Psycho, both the book and the Alfred Hitchcock film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, just among many.
I mean, there was a whole bit about that in American Horror Story as well.
Oh yeah, which episode, which season?
I want to say it was the Insane Asylum one, which Asylum.
Right. It's been a
Um,
while since I've seen that. I love
yeah,
that show.
I haven't watched it in a while either. But
What's interesting is that he became to be known as a transvestite since he was wearing his mother's skin, but I wouldn't, or is even transgender. I don't know if I would necessarily call him transgender because of him doing that. I think it was more of a mother fixation.
I think
But
so
you can
too.
see it in these films. In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface is he's wearing makeup, and he's like the woman of the house. He's cooking and cleaning, and obviously Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And then it got carried on to this film by Brian De Palma called Dress to Kill. Have you seen that one?
I have not.
It's if you're into Brian De Palma, it's a really well made movie, but I find it incredibly homophobic, and actually there's parts of it that are just straight up racist as well.
Oh my gosh.
Their depictions of it, it's like in the late 70s, early 80s, it was just a different time, and I don't think that Brian De Palma necessarily holds those political views. I think he's probably a good guy, but it was just a different time when I don't think people realized exactly what they were doing.
Oh yeah, I was having this discussion with my boyfriend the other day about how some movies just do not hold up. Like we're so socially aware now, especially with the internet and everything, that these things that have all of these heavy homophobia and transphobia and stuff like that, we're just like, oh, I did not notice that as a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so tell me a little bit, has any of this influenced your own writing?
Absolutely. I've been a true crime fanatic ever since I was a little kid. My dad was a true crime fan, and I used to like steal his books, like Helter Skelter and The Stranger Beside Me about Ted Bundy. And so my love of horror and my love of true crime have like completely intermingled. And so as a writer, yeah, I focus a lot on crime. I all my stories and books take place in Humboldt County, California, which is a notoriously outlaw place. It's like considered the cannabis center of the planet, and it's very rural with a lot of rednecks and a lot of drugs, and so drugs and crime are just something I have to put in every story just about.
I have a habit of doing that myself too. Currently, because I'm a horror author as well. Currently, I'm working on a what the love interest in my book is actually a murderer and is like slowly killing people to try and prevent some catastrophe. But she's killed enough people that she's like a serial killer at this point. And so I've been taking a lot of influence from female serial killers, which there are very few of.
Yeah, well, we got it's interesting to think about what is the definition of a serial killer. People say that Eileen Wernos is a serial killer, and I don't necessarily see her as technically a serial killer. I see her more as a thief who just liked to execute her victims because it was easier for her to get their belongings. But I would consider Carla Homolka a serial killer or a serial killer in a budding serial killer like she would have become. She truly enjoyed torturing and sexual sadism. She was interesting in that she was both a sadist and a masochist. You know, she liked Paul. You know what I'm talking about, right? Paul Bernardo and Carla
Yeah,
Homolka.
yeah.
Yeah. I've been fascinated with her for a long time. Because I've found very accurate descriptions of those tapes that they were apparently destroyed, but some of the people who saw them wrote like what they saw, and she gleefully participated in the torture of those girls. It's horrendous.
Yeah, I can't fathom like the mindset that puts people in this way, like what makes them want to murder people and stuff like that. I just don't have the brains for it, which reminds me of the movie. Have you seen The Cell?
No, it's not the Stephen King book, is it?
No,
No, no,
I don't
I don't
think
think I
so.
have seen it. Is it like cell, like as in like a prison, like a place that you would put someone?
Kind of. So it's about this serial killer that gets arrested. They catch him, and so they decide to experiment on him. And it's very much leans into the sci-fi of horror. And so this detective goes into well, I don't know. She's a detective or a therapist. I can't remember exactly, but she goes into his mind and she's like exploring his mind and trying to figure out what makes a serial killer and how do they think that way and everything. It's really a disturbing movie, but it's very good.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. I
It's
mean, yeah, to this day, psychologists really don't understand what it is that
yeah.
drives someone, you know. I mean, most serial killers are sexual sadists. You know,
Yeah. That is a big part of it for sure. A lot of it is a power trip and stuff like that. Like infamous, but Jeffrey Dahmer uh definitely slept with all of his victims before killing them.
or after he was a necrophiliac, yeah,
Oh
he
yeah,
loved to sleep with dead people, or he would also go to the bathhouses and drug people so
yep.
that he could have sex with their because he liked a unresponsive,
Hmm.
unconscious person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and he's a cannibal,
and
which
he's a
is
cannibal. He
fascinating.
definitely there's a lot of serial killers that are cannibals on like in a very disturbing like turn of events. They're like, I'll just eat it.
Well, no, I
Um,
think it's the ultimate form of control. You've
true.
actually like taken them and made them a part of you. You've put them into your body. It's
And I think that doesn't help with the psychosis that they're already dealing with because eating human meat is like really bad for us.
is it?
It's yeah, so it works similar to mad cow disease. Like if we feed beef to cows, they get mad cow disease. If you eat human meat as a human, you get a form of like madness from it.
I've never heard that. Well, there's Wendigo psychosis, which is a madness that makes you want to become a cannibal. But I mean, Because we covered the Wendigos on my podcast, Murder Coaster, and there was a famous case uh, where the guy ate his entire family and he survived the whole winter. And
Well,
there's I mean, the Donner Party, of course.
well, the Donner Party, what's really hilarious about that is that the Donner Party would have survived if they weren't racist because they had been offered food by Native Americans multiple times.
Well, they had Native American guides and they killed them and
Yeah,
ate them.
yeah. They had been like offered help and they were just like, nah, we're just gonna eat each other. I don't know what draws somebody to be so insanely racist and anti somebody of a different skin color that they're like cannibalism. That's the answer.
Yeah, cannibalism is definitely a fascinating subject. I mean, we're talking about from necessity, but like from someone like Dahmer or Ed Gein, or the people who
Do it out of
have a
joy.
fetish,
Hmm.
a sexual fetish out of it. It's
It's
pretty
definitely
grotesque.
very grotesque type of thing. There is a case of what I would call it morally acceptable, ethical cannibalism, where a man had his leg amputated, and he asked to keep it. He kept it, put it in the freezer, and he made tacos out of it and invited his friends over to enjoy tacos with him. Everybody knew that it was human meat and that it was his leg. And it's considered technically an ethical cannibalism because he gave consent.
I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to look that up. That sounds incredibly interesting. There was Robert Picton up in Canada. Uh, would he had a hog farm and he was killing all these prostitutes. He killed over 50 of them, and he ground the meat up and made it in with the pork. And his brother was a biker involved with the Hells Angels, and they would have these huge parties, and he would serve everybody the food. And some people got hepatitis from eating it.
Yeah, that's not shocking, like at all, because especially if it's not cleaned and prepped properly, like you can get hepatitis B, hepatitis A, like, and if the person has an STD or anything, you're gonna get that too. So cannibalism, kind of probably not the best thing ever to do.
Humans aren't the cleanest of animals.
We're really not, no matter how much we think we are the cleanest animal. But yeah, so speaking of cannibalism and crime, we got on a tangent there about cannibalism. Um, what would you say is like one of the most disturbing true crime events that you've ever heard of?
Oh geez, there's just so many. I mean, for me, what's disturbing is usually anything involving children. That's really a tough one for me.
Oh yeah, that's hard to stomach.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. There's just so many fucked up cases. That Robert Picton one I was just talking about, it gave me nightmares for some reason. I think it was just because the descriptions of his farm is just so disgusting and gross. I mean, I don't know. They're also disturbing. I mean, when you read the transcripts of what Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo had done, I mean, the way
Hmm.
they tortured those girls, torture's pretty intense too.
Yeah, torture is something that it's cringe to think about. It's like
But I was talking about
automatically.
that Wendigo case. I mean, this guy's name was Swift Runner.
Hmm.
He was a Cree Native American, and he forced his son to kill his sister and eat her.
Oh my God.
So that's pretty disturbing there.
Yeah, and I'm still at the point of fascination of the fact that there's so many um, murders that involve cannibalism.
Yeah, we also covered. Oh God, I'm blanking on the names though. Oh, what were their names? But do you know about that? There was a Greyhound bus driving through Canada, and this guy just went berserk and started stabbing the guy next to him. And
Oh my
everyone, they
God.
pulled the bus over and everyone ran off. And then he decapitated him and held the head up. And then he pulled out his eyes and ate the eyes. And then he cut out his heart and he ate the heart. And then he just started like cutting off pieces of meat off of him and putting him in the plastic bags.
Oh my God.
But
That
it,
is,
it's a modern story, but it happened right where the Wendigo myth is like at its most prevalent. So it's,
yeah,
this
that's,
spirit of loneliness and cannibalism that can overtake someone and possess them.
I'm trying to think of it, but there was this model in Canada. This guy, he ate his own boyfriend. Um, but I just tried to look it up to get the guy's name, and there's like several models who have killed and ate their partners. So
Oh,
here I thought it was going to be like a one-off. This guy killed.
yeah, it's a crazy world, man.
There's like a Wisconsin woman convicted of killing and dismembering her husband and scattering his body parts in various places. Oh,
Well,
wow.
speaking of women serial killers, have you followed the case of Shop Business? That's a really new one.
No, I haven't heard of it.
She, I don't know, on some amphetamine fueled sex, she murdered her boyfriend and then like had sex with the body for hours and then chopped them all up into little pieces. And she left his head in his parents' basement, apparently by accident, not realizing she had left it there. That's how she was caught.
Oh,
And
wow.
then when they went to court, she like attacked her lawyer. And like you can see the videos of her attacking her lawyer in court during the proceedings. It's pretty wild. She just got sentenced. At the end, they had to have her like all tied up with spit guards on and stuff in the courtroom.
Oh, wow. So I was wrong. It wasn't in Canada. It was in the UK, and it was former Mr. Gay UK got caught of murder and cannibalism. So apparently,
Oh, I
uh,
want to write that one down. Mr. Gay, huh?
yeah, former Mr. Gay UK. But yeah, apparently he chopped up his boyfriend and ate him.
Yeah, it's a sexual fetish. Gosh, I keep blanking on names, but that guy in Germany who answered an ad
Hmm.
and he brought him up to it was like a castle and he chopped off his penis while the guy was in the bed. The guy let him do it. It was completely consensual.
Yeah.
And then he
Yeah.
bled to death. And then the worst thing is he burnt the penis and he made it unedible, you know.
And it was all for nothing.
We did Albert Fish. He is incredibly disturbing and he also killed children. He liked to kill children. So that's probably one of the most disturbing ones. Do you know all about that? And he wrote the letter to the little girl's mother and stuff.
No, I haven't heard about it.
This is in like the 1930s in New York City. He uh he was this looks like a kindly old gentleman. It's terrifying because he was known as the boogeyman, like the
Mhm.
original boogeyman. Like there was these little kids playing in a hallway in a tenement house, and when the one child's father came, the other kid was missing, and he looked at his playmate and said, "What happened?" And he said, "The boogeyman took him."
Oh my God.
And they also called him the Gray Man because he was like elderly, stooped. He had a gray mustache, gray hair, and a gray parlor to him.
Hmm.
His skin tone, and like a child would go. It was like kind of like the Slender Man. Like a child would go missing, and they'd be like, "There was a gray man there," and that's it.
And it
And
became
like,
like an urban legend.
and he got himself caught because he kidnapped this little girl right from her parents' house. He used to be obsessed with the classified ads. Today he'd probably be an internet troll. He would go in the classified ads and find like people who were like looking to be a maid or looking to do this and just write them filthy, disgusting letters like,
Oh my
well, you
God.
can be my maid if you'll come and let me eat your shit and drink your pee and
Oh my
spank me and
God.
stuff. But so he saw this classified ad for this boy who wanted to go work on a farm, and he's like, "Well, I can kidnap this kid guy. He looks good." And he went over there, but the guy was he was 18 and he was much bigger than he had imagined. but in walked this little girl. I think she was 8 years old. Her name was Grace Budd. And he ended up saying, I'm going to a birthday party. My sister is having a birthday party for my niece. I could take her to the birthday party. And they let this little girl go with this stranger.
Oh my God, that's insane.
Yeah. And he took her to this abandoned, like the most creepy haunted house you can imagine, like this abandoned house that was all the wallpaper is peeling off. It's full of mold. And he chopped her up and he ate her and saved the meat. He ate her over a course of a week.
Oh
And then
wow.
it became a huge international news story, and people were looking for him, but the trail was cold. They couldn't find him. But then he couldn't resist, years later, writing a letter to the mother describing in detail how he had chopped her up and ate her. It's
Oh
a
my God.
really famous true crime letter. It's one of the most incredibly disturbing things you can ever read. But a very slick detective was able to use the envelope and trace the envelope back to a boarding house and find out who had stayed at this boarding house, and it had been him, and they caught him. And you've
Wow.
probably heard this. He when he got caught, he would stick needles into his groin and in between his testicles and his anus. He would shove sewing needles. And when they X-rayed him, he had X-rayed him, and he had 35 sewing needles stuck in there.
Oh my God. That sounds incredibly painful.
He was a total masochist. He loved pain. He used to he had his own cat of nine tails, like those whips that he made
Hmm.
himself, and he would beat himself. And he also had nail studded paddles that his
Oof.
he had a bunch of kids, and his son says he walked in the room one time and he's naked, furiously masturbating while beating himself on the behind with a nail studded paddle that's covered in blood and little hunks of flesh.
Oof.
That would be a weird thing to
That will
walk into.
I would immediately be the meme of Homer Simpson going back into the hedges.
Yeah, I think that's basically what he did.
Like, I'm gonna go. Jeez, that is really rough. I just I understand a little bit of like, BDSM and stuff like that, and the people that consent with all this stuff, and I have no qualms with that. But some people out there really take this way too far.
Well, yeah, we constantly say on our show that if you're two consensual adults, there's nothing wrong. I
Yeah,
mean, you can do whatever you want, but if someone's not consensual or there's a child involved, because a child cannot give consent,
yeah, no.
so then it's very, very bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so utterly disturbing. It's got me off guard there.
Yeah, Albert Fish, he's a doozy. He liked to howl at the moon too and eat raw meat when the moon was full, and they called him the werewolf of Wisteria.
Oh wow. Jeez. Okay, so what are three of your like favorite novels that have like true crime in them that blend true crime into fiction?
American Psycho is a masterpiece of postmodernism. Bret Easton Ellis he's one of my favorite authors, and it's heavily influenced by Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a Republican, clean cut yuppie, and so basically what Ellis was doing was taking this idea of like the Republican clean cut yuppie and transferring it over into like a one of those young New York stockbrokers at the time in the late 80s, and using that as a means of analyzing consumerism in the American 80s, this me generation of as well as all of the pop culture kind of things, such as like videotapes, being able to rent pornography and cocaine and the club scene. Just It's just a fantastic book. It Have you read it?
I have not.
A lot of people get turned off for it because it's kind of there's a lot of boring parts because he will just every time he meets somebody, he tells you exactly what they're wearing. And like he's
Ugh.
like, they have a Brooks Brothers suit on, they have an Armani tie on, they're wearing these kind of shoes because he's obsessed with like the look of things and the look of people, and he's obsessed with like money and high fashion, like how much money is their clothes worth. There's like a couple pages on bottled water,
Oh my
like
gosh.
Evian versus Perrier, yeah. And then he goes into like modern culture, like Whitney Houston. There's like pages on like Whitney Houston and what she means and like her thing. And then there'll be like a chapter where he takes rats and starves them in a cage and
Oh God.
takes a woman and puts a tube in her vagina and puts a starving rat into her so that the rat can begin to eat her insides out before he
Oh.
chainsaws her in half. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh.
juxtaposing like these really mundane, like just uh, uh um like not very deep people, like just very shallow culture, this culture of shallowness with the most incredibly extreme and disturbing uh brutal torture and murder that's probably ever been written. I mean, it's truly disgusting.
That is very disgusting. Oh my God. So I was thinking about one of these other true crimes that I was really interested when it happened. Happened in Ohio. This guy had a dungeon with women in it, and kind of similar to, have you seen the movie Phone?
Yes, yeah, I'm a
Yeah,
and the short story too. I'm a big Joe Hill
yeah.
fan.
So definitely kept these women in a dungeon chained up to the walls, and
Mm.
it it's pretty disturbing. They had gone and disappeared for more than a decade, and they finally got saved by a neighbor who had heard them screaming for help. But they
Oh,
were like, yeah,
is
they
it the
were.
one where they had they had a little kid and stuff, right? The one
Uh,
girl had a child.
I think so. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know that's that case. That's yeah. He was the guy who did it was a bass player. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, ended up there was a child that came from it after, in the, like 6 years old child.
Yeah.
And just absolutely bananas to me that, and apparently it wasn't just him, it was his brothers too.
Oh, there was a case just the other day where this guy had a dungeon and he got caught.
Oh my God. It reminds me of the case in California where they had all of their the couple had their children tied to beds, and they were just like not letting them go anywhere, not letting them get up to go to the bathroom and anything, feeding them from their bed and everything. And it's just absolutely baffling to me that somebody would even have that thought process come through their head. Like, not just an intrusive thought of I should run myself off the road, but like,
Yeah, I'm a parent. I have two children, so like that it's beyond my scope of understanding. I
yeah,
mean, all of this being beyond my scope of understanding is why I'm so fascinated by it, I think. I've always been fascinated by horror, and true crime is like just it's the real deal. It's real life monsters, and you're just like, how, why, what is up with humanity?
yeah, that is, I don't, I don't get it, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, so if you could write a book in a month and you were going to get paid for it, what would you write about?
Well, the new book I'm working on is about it's like a kind of a treasure hunt in a way. It's there's this little boy and his father's in prison, and when he visits him, the father says, this guy owed me this money and he died, but he left me this map to where this money's buried way out in the back hills.
Oh,
And the
wow.
kid has to go out into the back hills and try to find where this supposed money is buried. And the back hills are just incredibly dangerous with like biker gangs and speed freaks and meth labs and all of that kind of jazz. And he's befriended by a little girl, and it's like kind of like an adventure and a very incredibly pitch black dark treasure hunt adventure.
Wow, that sounds really cool. Uh, Speaking of your writing, how do you deal with sensitivity of like victims and stuff in your writing? Because that's something in true crime that gets overlooked quite a bit.
Well, try to have sympathy for everyone, include in my work. In true crime, it's hard to have a lot of sympathy for the villains because
Hmm.
I mean, when you're dealing with someone who's a psychopath, they don't have empathy. They don't. I usually don't write about. Every now and then I will in a short story, but I don't usually write about psychopaths because there's something missing with them. They're broken people, so I don't find them as fascinating as a writer. Because you can't. They're hard to sympathize with.
Yeah,
I like
definitely.
the villains who you can like get in their head and kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing, and it's not necessarily for gratuitous reasons. It's more like selfish reasons. But I mean, it the issue you're bringing up is talked about a lot. The
Hmm.
victims and being sensitive with the victims, and it's very tough. It's because the victims deserve to have their stories told. They don't deserve to, to not be known. But at the same time, you want to flesh them out. But I mean, let's face it, everyone's really fascinated with the killer and the crimes.
Hmm.
Some podcasts are very, very victim focused, and I like that. There's a one called Hillside about the Hillside Stranglers, and it's just all about the victims, and it's an excellent podcast. And it's about how some of the victims were treated unfairly and seen differently.
Mm.
Especially like there's a woman of color, and she is just completely denigrated pretty much in the reports and called a prostitute and a drug addict, and it's not really
Oh,
necessarily
wow.
true. She was going to secretarial school. She was a, you know what I mean, she was like a she had a daughter, she had a family. And then there's a white person who was also in secretarial school. They both happen to be in secretarial school, and everyone's like, oh, student going to be a secretary, and the discrepancies between the way they're described in the press is it's just atrocious and terrible. So I think when you deal with true crime, you have to take that into but I think I'm the kind of person who thinks that if you need a trigger warning, you probably shouldn't be reading extreme horror or delving into true crime, like for instance, Michelle McNamara, the author of the book I'll Be Gone in the Dark about the Golden State Killer.
Hmm.
Yeah. The so she delved into the crimes. She renamed him. He was originally named Ear for East Area Rapist, and he was also called the original Night Stalker. She gives him a new name, the Golden State Killer. She starts writing about him. She starts doing this research. She starts contacting police, and because of that, this huge effort's made to try to find him, and eventually his DNA is gotten, and because the Santa Barbara police didn't want to give any of the evidence up because they didn't like Santa Barbara being portrayed as a place where a murder could happen because it's like the yuppie beach community, and she I mean, she died before it happened, but if it wasn't for her, the case never would have been solved. It never ever would have been solved. But in
Yeah.
doing so, she found all these crime scene photos. And so she put the crime scene photos out there. And then victims of the crimes were complaining that the crime scene photos were out there and saying it was bad, and like they had looked at them and they're like, it hurt me to look at them. Like I got PTSD from looking at them. And it's like, why did you choose to look at them? Now you're
Yeah.
going to insult this woman who solved the fucking crime. Did you want the guy to be free? Did you want him to not get caught? Because it was because of her that he was caught. Now you're going to like denigrate her because she put the crime scene photos out there. That's how he got caught. That she had to get interest in the case. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a double-edged sword. I think that the victims deserve a lot of respect, and you should try to handle it in a mature, in a good way. But at the same time, if you've got issues, don't look. If my family was killed, I
Hmm.
wouldn't want to look looking for the crime scene photos.
I think I've always put it that as somebody who has PTSD, I always put it that the way I handle things is my own effort. I have to do that on my own. I can't blame other people for reality. And if I go and read a horror book and it triggers something, or more specifically, a while back before I was in therapy to deal with my PTSD, I was watching Castle Rock, and it, it, when the chick takes this guy's eye out with a ice cream scoop, that gave me a panic attack. But like, I didn't go and write net or the person who wrote the thing and like yell at them or anything like that. I didn't go, "How dare you put that in there?" Because it's not their fault. And now that I have recovered a lot from my PTSD and learned how to cope with everything, I could watch that scene no problem. And I think that if you can just get into the mindset of my triggers are my responsibility, then life would be a lot easier, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's interesting because that's you know what I mean. It's it like, you know, I don't know exactly what happened to you, but an ice chip to the eye is something that you wouldn't think that, you know what I mean, for most people that wouldn't be a trigger. You know what I mean? Everyone, it just goes to show that everyone has these individual triggers. Not everyone's triggers are the same. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And like, really anything can trigger anybody, you know?
I mean, there's an entire phobia that is just based around seeing holes, like too many holes in an area.
Oh,
Uh,
really? I don't know
uh,
that one.
I think it's called tryptophobia. Um, yeah, tryptophobia. It's an aversion or repulsion to objects like honeycombs and sponges that have repetitive patterns or clusters of small holes.
Oh, I do know about that. My friend has got that.
Yeah, it's such a wild one to me, but it's like it's one thing if somebody's got that and you're like, "Hey, look at this sponge," because then you're the asshole, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and you're being a dick about it. But it's a whole nother thing if they like come across a sponge and then blame somebody for having a sponge in their house, you know.
Right, right. And patterns do it to him too.
Yeah, patterns as well.
Yeah, I'm like, don't eat acid, dude. All you do is you see like weird
Mm.
patterns and shit. It'd be a fucking nightmare. Holy shit.
No joke. The last time I actually talked about this in one of the episodes on found footage for this podcast. I was talking about how when I watched Paranormal Activity, I was on acid, and it was the first time I'd ever tried acid. And oh my God, watching that movie on acid made it 10 times better.
It's a scary movie,
Yeah,
I
it's
think. It's you
watching
know, it
somebody get
works.
drugged.
It's good.
Yeah, watching somebody get dragged down the stairs by an invisible entity when you're high off your rocker, like that is
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah, I like that one. I thought that they achieved some scariness. I remember trying to watch The Shining once in the middle of the night, high on acid, when I was like a little kid. I was like, I got ate acid at a party for some reason, and then went home, and then I'm just sitting there like tripping balls all alone by myself. So I go down in the basement and I put The Shining on, and I couldn't watch it. I had to turn it off. I got so fucking freaked out.
Yeah, I would too.
The
Like
music.
just that alone, it's amazing what your brain does to you, what you see and everything when you're on acid. I think that everybody should try it at least once in their life. Well, that's like a personal
Unless you
opinion.
have any signs of schizophrenia or
Yeah,
schizophrenia runs in your family,
if
because
you have
it
anything
triggers
about
it really bad.
yeah, or any paranoia whatsoever, because
Yeah, try to be in a good headspace.
yeah, and have a babysitter. You gotta have a trip sitter.
Nice, yeah. Running water always helps, I think. You go to the forest and sit by a creek, everything becomes very peaceful.
Yeah, the first time I ever did shrooms, I actually sat by a creek and watched the water, and my friend was sitting there going, "Carmilla, Carmilla, Carmilla," for like an hour, and I wasn't responding because I was so entranced by the water.
Nice. The wonders of nature.
Hey, there's very few cannibals who took acid first, so I'm just saying
That would be an interesting correlation to study.
it would be.
Um, but I think one of the interesting things is how films constantly change true crime. We just had Harry McLean, this author, on, and he had written a book about Starkweather. You know about that, Charles Starkweather?
I have
He was a
not.
spree killer in the 1950s. So he went with his girlfriend and they killed all his girlfriend's parents, and then they went on a murder spree. And Natural Born Killers is based on it, and Badlands with Martin Sheen is based on it.
Oh
But in
wow.
the real life case, it really appears that he had kidnapped her. She had nothing. She wasn't even there. Like, he went to her house and killed her parents, and then he hid the bodies. And when she came home, he grabbed her and tied her up,
Oh my
and then
God.
kept her at gunpoint. And but this idea of this romance, it was just too much for people to not want to accept the fact that it was a boyfriend and girlfriend deeply in love on a murder spree together when she was actually a fucking kidnap victim, and she ended up doing 20 years in prison.
Oh wow. That
Yeah.
sucks.
And you watch Natural Born Killers, and you know what I mean? It's like this Romeo and Juliet kind of image. And I don't think it was like that at all. And then they also gloss over some of the murders. Like, in the real life story, he had killed her little sister, who was a toddler, by bashing her head in and then throwing a knife at her throat.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then in Natural Born Killers, when they kill the parents, the little brother comes out and she's like, "You're free now. Go, you're free." And you're like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Uh,
not only are you like romanticizing the whole thing, but you're also romanticizing the actual murders and not getting it, not showing how despicable and fucked up it was.
yeah, making it sound like the parents deserve to be murdered and everything.
Yeah.
Oof, just rough. Yeah, I think that true crime influences a lot of our media, and I think that's why we have like a large amount of people who are obsessed with serial killers. And I don't mean like, man, I love looking into serial killers, but I mean like in love with, obsessed.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Groupies,
like,
serial killer groupies.
yep. And was it what was his name? Charles Manson was married to one of his groupies, and
No, no,
no,
no.
I thought it was. I could have swore. I don't know which one it was, but one of them was
You talking about
married to one.
Star?
Maybe.
He didn't marry her.
Oh, he didn't marry her.
No, it's really fascinating. She wanted to marry him so that she could get his body, and she was going to put it on display, have it stuffed and put it on display.
Oh, that is insane.
Yeah, I kind of wish they had done it. Imagine how cool that would have been. I would have gotten a selfie with it.
Wild.
But
Oh,
yeah, the Kenneth Bianchi, the one of the Hillside Stranglers, had a groupie, and he convinced her to go out and try to do a copycat murder, and he actually gave her some of his semen. He
oh my
slipped her
God.
in prison, slipped her some semen, and he's like, "Put this on the body after you kill it, and they'll think that the real killer is still out there." And she went and straight up attempted to do it. Luckily, the woman she brought back, she went to a bar and was like, asked this lady if she wanted to go back to her hotel room and do some coke with her. And when they did, she attacked the lady and tried to kill her. But I think the lady was she had either been trained as a police officer or she was in the Navy, something, and like fought back and got away. And then she of course what ended up going to prison. But it's insane. Like, Richard Ramirez had so many of them. He was famous for it. They all get them. Like, what's his name? Chris, that guy who murdered his family. He's got tons of them right now. Yeah, it's bizarre. I've looked into that. I've actually read a couple books about the psychology of women who love serial killers. I don't remember the name of the paraphilia. It's got a name for women who are attracted to murderers. A psychological name. I'm blanking out right now, but yeah, you could go onto like TikTok or something, and you know what I mean. You can see tons of them talking about they're into Jeffrey Dahmer, and he is fucking gay. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you're like, he wouldn't have liked you anyway.
So
Crazy.
it's called hybristophilia.
Yes, hybristophilia. That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah. That's they say that it's just to commit crimes, but I think a lot of them more focused towards murder.
Yeah, I wrote a short story about it. I was asked to write a short story for an anthology, and I wrote a story about she's like 17, 18-year-old girl who became a serial killer groupie and was like going to visit the serial killer in prison and fantasizing about being raped and shit. They're
Oh my
like, it's
God.
I know that's what they said. They're like, we can't. They're like, this is brilliant. It's really well written. We love it, but we are not going to publish this. Sorry.
Sorry, can.
So then I wrote up another stupid story about a haunted tattoo. That was like, was this better? They're like, yes, thank you.
Um, but the idea, the fantasy of being raped is an actual real thing,
Yeah,
and I think it comes from the desire of being overpowered, wanting to be overpowered.
masochism. Yeah.
Yeah, but truly, utterly disturbing, honestly.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But okay, so let's talk about movies. What is your favorite scary movie?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I mean, I get asked questions like this all the time, and every time it's like got a different answer. I'll give you a movie that I think is terrifying and is supposed to be based on true crime, but if you it's really not. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Oh, I've
Seen
heard of
that
that
one?
one. I haven't seen it yet, but I have heard of it.
It's incredibly disturbing, and it's there's something about it that's just gets under your skin and it really horrifies you. Um, there's some there's a little bit of found footage in it, or because he's
Mm.
carrying a video camera around. And there's this one scene where like they go in, they kill this family, and it's just gnarly. But that one
Oof.
was supposed to be based on Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, and I don't know if you've ever delved into them, but they were just a bunch of liars. Like Henry Lucas said he killed like 300 people or something. He definitely did not, and they were actually lovers, so
Oh, wow.
very different than the movie version. But that's a good one.
Yeah. So what do you think how true crime is going to influence horror fiction within the next 5 years?
Just the same way it's been going along, you know.
You think
Uh,
so?
oh yeah, oh yeah. Uh, there'll be new cases. People will be digging back into the old cases, changing it up, trying to romanticize it, which I'm not really the biggest fan of. I think you should talk about how disturbing it is,
Yeah.
but definitely. I mean, true crimes. People think that true crime is really popular now, and it is. It absolutely is. But the truth is, true crime has always been popular, incredibly popular.
Hmm.
Bonnie and Clyde. When Bonnie and Clyde died, people ran to the car and started cutting pieces of the clothing off, and then the cops had to come because someone tried to actually cut Clyde's trigger finger off as a souvenir.
Oh my God.
That's how into true crime people were back in the 20s. So
I feel like people are still very much that much into true crime. A
the
lot of
souvenir thing's a little it's a
it's a
little over
little
the top.
much. It's a little much.
Yeah.
So what is one question that you wish I would have asked you?
Oh, I don't know, man. How come I'm such a good writer? No. Oh, I don't know. I think we've covered a lot. I mean, I'm having fun. I really, I really, I really don't know.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here. And is there anything last notes you want to touch on?
Um, uh, I don't know. We could talk about Charlie Manson some, but it's already been done so much.
Yeah, he's an overdone
I'm
topic for
obsessed with
sure.
that guy.
So where can my listeners find you online?
You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. www.murdercoasterpodcast.com is our website for our podcast. And Murder Coaster Podcast is available everywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, everywhere else. And my website is www.matthewvbrockmeyer.com. And yeah, I'm out there. I'm not too hard to find. Just Google me.
Awesome. What are some parting words?
Um, Stay safe and don't eat anybody.
Yeah,
I'd be
please,
happy.
please don't eat anybody. Why is cannibalism so rampant?
Be careful.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show, Matthew. I had a great time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. You've been listening to Cat Scratch Radio, a horror podcast with your host, Carmilla Mays, also known as Matu C. Lawrence. If you want to find me on social media, just look up MX Carmilla.